We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back on Liberty Nation Radio, continuing our discussion with Liberty Nation senior political analyst Tim Donner on Joe Biden's White House tenure. So, Tim, we have to talk about Biden's latest approval ratings. Hit me with the numbers, please.
Well, there's a couple ways to look at it. The one way is that Joe Biden is lower than Donald Trump ever got in the Real Clear Politics average. He is now below 39% in the Real Clear Politics average of credible polls. Perhaps just as revealing is that he's below 40% in 5 of the 8 polls, and he's the 8 most latest polls. Yeah. And he is at 33% or below in a couple of recent polls. That is what you call rock bottom. Can't go much lower than that. And what's extraordinary about it, Mark, is that it's for a new president, 16 months into his term, and people have essentially given up and feel that he's a hopeless cause, which is why the New York Times has given permission for Democrats. Again, this is critical because this is scripture for the left. They've got scriptural basis to go out and support someone other than Joe Biden, which is simply stating what everybody else, the rest of us have known for a long time, which is that this guy can't possibly. Maybe he could run again, but he can't possibly win again in 2024. The deficits are just so deep.
Yeah, I mean, it really is historically bad. And I think with those polls, I was looking at them as well. And so you've got when Trump was at his lowest point in the presidency, which was in the days following January 6th, 2021, in terms of approval, the House was getting set to impeach him. The media at large was putting out a message that Donald Trump is directly responsible for what they termed an insurrection. It was all on his shoulders. You take these two things together, and yet Joe Biden, without a January 6th, without an impeachment trial, he's managed to plumb these depths all by himself. You say there's no way he could win in 2024, but how does he come back in some measure from this I think to impact the November elections?
Well, I think that the Democratic Party at this point is bathed in a sense of hopelessness because things aren't going to get better for Joe Biden. His neurological decline, so to speak, is only going to get worse. It's an irreversible condition, and he's proven himself simply not up to the job. He's not going to suddenly be up to the job because he's not going to get younger. His ability to perform his job, to lead, to take control, to command the stage is not going to get better. He's in a very perilous position because in ordinary circumstances, the party would congratulate him, thank him for taking down Donald Trump, give him a gold ring, and send him out to pasture. But they don't have anybody to take his place because his vice president, the big global plan, of course, was to have her serve the second term of the Biden-Harris administration, whereas Biden has often said the Harris-Biden administration. Yeah. But that plan has fallen through the floor because she's a certain non-starter as a nominee, and all the rest of the ready-made candidates really devalued or even disgraced themselves during the 2020 primary. So the pickings are very bare. So the Democrats are in a really serious bind in which they can only hope that Donald Trump runs and they can get people to vote strictly about January 6th and the end of his presidency instead of the 4 years that preceded it, minus, of course, the pandemic.
But, you know, I've got a question about January 6th and how that's going to impact things. But something that just occurred to me is the White House has just taken on Keisha Lance Bottoms, the the one-term former mayor of Atlanta, who was also a potential pick for Joe Biden's running mate in 2020. And I suspect we're going to hear innumerable stories from the fourth estate about what a wonderful communicator she is, because, I mean, there's desperation coming through there. Now, back to the January 6th thing that you brought up there. Do you think that the let's call it an inquisition that's taking place now and being televised?
Trial.
Yeah, show trial, absolutely. Do you think that will sway the voters come November? Or, and this is where I'm heading on this, I think it's going to backfire. What do you think?
Well, I think it could have had an influence on November. I think it still will because of the wall-to-wall coverage of these hearings. 20 million people have watched that original, the first hearing in prime time. That's not an extraordinary number, but it's not small either. They had a chance to make significant gains if they had played it straight, if they had put on enough Republicans to at least make it appear that it was bipartisan. But instead,
you don't count Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger.
Well, and with Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, it's the fact if they were included but not the only ones, that might have been okay. But if you took 4, 5, or 6 Republicans, 4 of whom were, let's say, neutral or open-minded or not flagrant Trump supporters, and put on maybe 1 or 2 that did support Trump, what is Jim Jordan going to say to the horrific footage and everything? Is he going to be able to make Trump look good? No, probably remain silent. But the point is they had a chance to make this something. They could have been a contender, as the old movie said. But instead,
could have been somebody.
They could have been somebody, but instead they look like bums because it's just people bore witness to what a trial looks like in the old Soviet Union or today's Cuba, where the outcome is predetermined, no dissenting testimony is permitted, and the nation is saturated with one side of a complicated story.
All right, and final question for you, Tim. Yes or no answer, and perhaps it's the most important one. Is Joe Biden envious of Jimmy Carter?
Well, I have to give credit to Graham Noble of LibertyNation.com because he put together the best single subtitle of the year. I wrote a piece on LN basically talking about if you think that things are as bad for Joe Biden as for Jimmy Carter, forget it. They're far worse because there was, at least in Carter, some youth, some vigor, some vitality, some good ideas. He actually did some good things. But with Joe Biden, there's no hope of any of that because he's so obviously flagrantly over the hill. So the subtitle that Graham Noble came up with was Joe Biden, you're no Jimmy Carter.
And on that note, Tim Donner, thank you ever so much.
You're welcome.
You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the Radio America network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. Down the road, we discuss red flag laws, but after this short break, we're asking why nobody's willing to admit that Biden is presidente non grata in 2024. Don't touch that dial. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.